Hey everybody, welcome to Harmon Garage. I'm Aaron. Today's a new day and we've got a couple different things going on. I've been goofing around this morning just because I felt like goofing around this morning, and I went ahead and mocked up my good head on this block, and I was looking at my cam and cam specs and doing some research, find out what valve springs I'm gonna need and stuff like that. I don't have anything for this head other than the stainless steel valves, so I'm just kind of tinkering. I just set it on there, see what it looked like, see if that valve cover that I've had forever sitting around was gonna work. But that's not what we're working on today. Real quick ad here. If you get a chance, go check out my merch site, www.harmongarage.net. You might see something on there that you want, and anything that I sell on there helps to do builds of my own, like the old burnout truck over here. But today, we're getting back on cherry pie. I'm going to come in here and strip out all the stuff that I can easily strip out. Get the old motor mounts out, and then I'm gonna tape everything off. I'm gonna pull the headlights, the horns, hood latch, all that stuff. Tape everything off as good as I can, and then we're gonna come in here and clean and scuff the whole engine compartment and shoot it with some fresh paint so it looks good. Want to get all that done, because once I get that done, then I can set the motor back down in there, and then we can keep moving forward on getting old cherry pie done. After I get that done and get it painted, I'm gonna let it sit to dry for a couple of days. So I'm going to grab this throttle body over here. It's the one that came off the truck, and I'm going to take that apart and rebuild it, and I'll do a step-by-step for you guys to show you how to rebuild a Chevy throttle body. So I'm gonna get my stuff together, clean up a little bit, and we're gonna get started. All right, well, I got everything that I'm gonna pull out of the engine compartment pulled out. I cleaned it up, I scuffed it all down with Scotch-Brite, I wiped it all down again. So I'm ready to start taping stuff off. Got all that stripped out, scuffed, wiped down. After I tape it, I'll go over it with a blow nozzle and just blow any loose stuff out, but I've scuffed everything. So should be pretty clean, ready to paint. I gotta tape off all the way around the outside. I gotta tape off all the trim and everything up here. And the AC box, I'm gonna tape off the brake master cylinder and paint the booster and all that, and then I gotta go through and tape off everywhere that these wires are coming out of the firewall, and tie them up somewhere so they're not gonna be in the way while I'm painting. I decided to leave this jack instruction sticker in here because it's in really good shape, and we're going to be putting the jack and stuff that was in back in. So I'll tape that off, I'll leave it there, tape it off, and I'm going to go ahead and start taping. We'll get it all taped up, and then we'll be able to spray some paint in there. All right, I got everything taped off. I got everything scuffed, I got everything wiped down. I came back after I taped it and blew all the loose dust and stuff off. So we're ready to put some paint on it. So I'm gonna grab the paint and we'll get started. just real quick, did anybody notice that aerosol spray paint cans don't have as much paint in them anymore as they used to? I'm not really joking. I used to be able to paint the core support inside and out, both inner fenders, the inside of both fenders, and a firewall with 2 cans of paint. Well, I just burned through 2 cans of paint and still have a long way to go. But I got a good coat on. Firewall, inner fenders, inside of the fenders. Don't look too bad. I got most of the back of the core support, but it's kind of light and needs a second coat. So I'm gonna have to go buy probably 2 more cans of paint. I still got to paint the front of the core support, and I still got to paint the top of the core support, and then the frame rails and the steering shaft and stuff like that. I've got brush on paint like I did with the other ones, so I'll brush that on. But this inner fender is going to need a second coat. It's got some real light spots in it. So yeah, it didn't turn out bad. Like I said, I still got to put another coat of paint on it, so I'm going to leave all the tape on. And I'll get some more paint tonight. I'll come in the morning, shoot some paint on there real quick, and I'll show you guys how it turns out. Alright, well, I went this morning, got more paint for old cherry pie, and got it finished up. So I'm going to show you guys what it's looking like, and go from there. So I put a second coat in the places where it was needed, and got the back of the core support all finished up, and then I got the front of the core support and the horns all done, and I got 2 thick coats on the top of the core support. So it's all looking pretty smooth and good. I'm gonna let it sit and cure for probably a couple days so that it's good and bonded and cured and hardened and everything else that it needs to do. And then I'll get in there and brush paint the frame and the steering box and the steering rod, or the intermediate shaft, and the bottom of the column and all that stuff. So I still got to paint the intermediate shaft, the box, the frame rails, cross members, all that stuff. But I'm going to do all that with a brush like I normally do. And I haven't pulled the tape off any of the stuff coming through the firewall because I don't want to climb in there to do it while the paint could still be tacky. So I'm going to get my little work area over here cleaned up a little bit, and then we're going to throw that throttle body up here on my little bench, and I'm going to show you guys how to rebuild it. Okay, this is supposed to be my welding table and a spot to sit down and do little stuff like this, but just like any other flat surface in the shop, it catches a lot of crap. So we're going to rebuild this GM throttle body that goes on Cherry Pie's 350, and I'm going to go through it for you step by step and show you guys how to do it in case anybody has one they're needing to rebuild. Maybe I can help you out a little bit. First thing we got to do is take top cover off, which will allow us to get to the injectors. We'll pull them off, and then we'll be able to take this whole pedestal off of the top. And you want to pay attention to what comes from where when you take it apart, because there's a lot of different size screws that are all very similar, but they pretty much have to go where they come out of. I pretty much know which screws go where, so I just try to keep them somewhat separated. And keep in mind, this stuff's been on here for a long time, most likely. So it's not always all that easy to get off. There we go. You pop that loose. I'm going to set this off to the side for a second, and we're going to take this over because there's screws down here. Get those cleaned out. I don't necessarily know that this throttle body was bad. The motor that this was on was running when it blew up, and then they just pulled it off and put it on this junkyard motor. So it did work, but it's got signs that it was leaking, and we're going through all this hassle to clean up everything and make it good and nice. Might as well do the same with the throttle body, get it re-gasketed and cleaned up and make sure it's flowing fuel like it's supposed to and everything else. So and you find stuff like that where its spring's broken inside. Hopefully the rebuild kit comes with a spring, because if not, we're going to have to find one. And you got your diaphragm in here. Like so. That's your top plate. Take that and set it to the side. And then these injectors are usually not easy to get out. They got O-rings that hold them in there, and there's really no way to pry on them. So you just got to be careful. If you can get them to spin, you can usually get them to move, but these aren't wanting to spin. So I'm going to go ahead and take this tower off that the injectors are in, and see if we can get them out. Okay, it's been a little while since I did one of these, so I know what I'm doing, but I gotta kind of refresh my memory. In order to get this tower with the injectors in it off, you have to remove these fittings that the fuel lines plug into. And then that'll lift right out of there. This thing's definitely been leaking and covered in crap. Those O-rings are tight in there. Soak those down with a little bit of brake parts cleaner. Rubber and plastic don't really like brake parts cleaner, and we're going to have new ones to put in there, so I'll let that sit over there and soak. We're going to take off our throttle position sensor so we don't ruin it, cleaning and all that stuff. Now, I'm not going to take the butterflies out because there's not any real signs of their seals leaking, and I don't like undoing these screws that hold the butterfly valves on, because if you don't get them back in tight enough, then they have a tendency to fall out and down into your motor, and none of that is good. So if they look like they're in good shape and it doesn't look like the shaft seals are leaking, I leave them alone. Next thing I got to do is pull this sensor off, and then we'll be ready to start cleaning this thing all up. Okay, I got that sensor out. It's really carboned up and dirty, so we'll clean it up real good. It still functions, so I'll clean it up and reuse it. But now, other than taking your main shaft and your butterflies out, that's about as far as this thing strips down. So I'm going to take it over and give it a very thorough cleaning with wire brushes, plastic brushes, scrapers, carb cleaner, whatever it takes to get this as clean as I possibly can. I'm going to go through all my ports. Fuel doesn't go through this part. It all comes through here. It goes in here, comes up here, and goes through your injectors. So everything in here is air passages. So I'm going to go through and thoroughly clean this, make sure I get all my vacuum passages, air passages, everything, my butterflies clean, the butterfly seats clean, because you can See in there, they're carboned up pretty good. So I'm just going to thoroughly clean this the best that I can, and then I'm going to come back and try to get those injectors out, and we'll clean that up real good too. But I'm going to go spend some time cleaning, and I'll bring you guys back when we got it all cleaned up. Alright, well, it's the next day. That throttle body ended up being way dirtier than I thought it was, and I spent the rest of yesterday cleaning everything, and then I let it soak fully submerged in simple green all night, and the exception of some staining and stuff like that, I'm impressed with the way it came out. It got pretty clean compared to what it was, so it's alright. I wish it was perfect. It's not. I'll just show you. This turned out fantastic. The thing's clean, doesn't have any goop on it. I blew out all the passages with carb cleaner and air. Everything super clean. My top plate for my injectors came out really good. It's mostly clean. This, on the other hand, just has some staining and stuff that just doesn't want to come off. But that's okay. It looks 100 times better than it did. And then this morning, one of the older gentlemen in my small town reached out to me and asked me if I could help him out with his truck, because that's his only means of transportation to get around. So took the morning off, went over there, got him going again. So now we're ready to get back to this. So I'm going to get everything together. We're ready to start putting this throttle body back together. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that this spring was broken when I took it out. The kit, I got the full rebuild kit here. The kit did not come with a new spring, but I just so happened to have one laying around in my piles of junk, so we're good to go with that. And I'm just going to get started rebuilding this thing. So the first thing I'm going to do, these injectors have this screen on them and an O-ring, and the kit comes with all new parts for this. So the screens don't actually look that bad compared to how dirty the rest of this throttle body was, but we're rebuilding it and we got new ones, so we might as well change them. They just pop on there. And I'm not seeing my O-rings. There they are. So, got your screen, got an O-ring. Sometimes these screens come off really easy. Sometimes they can really be a pain, but you just got to kind of get underneath them and get them working a little bit. Usually once you get them to move, you can kind of grab them and twist them off. Or it's just going to prove me wrong and be a pain in the butt. So, one way or another, it's coming off. There we go. Okay, so we got that off. New screen. Take it. You want to be careful with these, because if you don't push them evenly and you push at an angle too hard or something like that, these little plastic things will snap really easy. So that other one slid right on. This one's being a little bit more difficult, but I'm just working my way around, slowly pushing it down. Alright, got it all the way down. Got my O-ring for that. So now on these cups where your injectors sit in, there's these little washers. They're kind of like they call them a washer, they're like a crush washer, crush sleeve, something like that. But they sit right down here in this little groove. So when you clean this all out, you want, like, one of these washers fell out and the other one stayed in there, and I was looking all over for it because it gets down in there and you can't see it. But because the original ones are the same color as the base. But those washers just sit in there like that. And then you got just your O-ring. Your O-ring goes in there on top of the washer. Like so. Pop that in there. And then you're going to grab your injector and you just slide that down in there. Then you want to push it in as good as you can to seat it, but essentially you're going to use your top plate with your screws and lock that in. That's not everybody's way of doing it. There may be people that'll tell you, no, don't do that. That's the way I've always done it, and it's worked for me. So I'm going to get our other washer in. We'll get our other O-ring in. Like so. Grab our other injector. That, and you want to make sure your posts where it hooks up are straight across, because when it goes to plug in, you want it to be right. So look down here, make sure your nozzle's going into the hole where it's supposed to go. Push those down. And we got our top plate for that, and that's where our diaphragm accelerator pump goes. So we got our new diaphragm. We got this all cleaned up. When you look at your diaphragm, it's got this push button up here, and then it's got this cup down here. Your spring goes in your cup, and it's got these little ears that come out and go onto these. So that's the only way that it can go on. I mean, it lines up for you. Cup goes down towards your spring, your little button goes up, and then you're going to take your spring and your housing and put that in there. This is not a fun part, trying to get this on here without screwing up this diaphragm. It's kind of a pain in the rickus. I'll get it one way or another. There we go. I just put this on backwards. You look at this, it's got this little notch here. That notch sits in that flat spot there. So I'm going to see if I can pull this back apart and turn it without wrestling it again, but 99% sure I'm going to have to wrestle it again. Guess I should have paid better attention before I started putting it together. The gasket's in right, it's just this cover plate, so let's see if we can leave the diaphragm where it is and just spin. Nope, ain't gonna work. Alright, let's try this again. Just so you guys know, this spring has a lot of pressure on it, and I'm really putting quite a bit of effort into holding this down, so that's why I'm not saying a whole lot. Alright, get 2 screws in to hold it. Snug that down. And every one of these complete throttle bodies that I've taken apart, the screws have always been loose. And they've always been leaking, and they always look like somebody put them in a bucket of used motor oil forever and then let them sit out in the sun so it could bake on. So I always make sure when I put them back together I get the screws really good and tight. I don't know if there's torque specs on this stuff. There probably is, but I've never used it. So Alright, I've been checking this the whole time I've been putting it in, but you want to look and make sure that you can see the edge of your diaphragm all the way around, because then you know you got it laid in there flat and it didn't get smashed down in the hole. Which you can see this one all the way around, it's fine. So I know I'm good. So that's all good. Now we're going to grab our gasket that goes on here. And we'll set that down on there. And then there's a little flat kind of foam style washer, and it goes down in here. Or I guess it doesn't really have to go down in there. You can probably smarter if you put it on the accelerator pump. And that's not the right thing because it doesn't even fit. That's supposed to be what it is. It's just supposed to be a dust seal. But alright, so we'll set that down in there. And then almost did it again. Just about every single one of these that I've done, I always forget to put this gasket on right here. It's just this little gasket here, and that's your fuel inlet. And if you don't remember to put this gasket on, which like I said I've forgot a few times, then as soon as you turn the key on and the fuel pump starts running, it starts spraying. I mean spraying fuel out of there. So now we got that. All set up. We'll take this, get it down on there like so. Get our screws started in here. And like I said, I'm going to use this top plate to pop these injectors down into place. So before I even worry about putting any of my other screws up here or anything like that, I'm going to just slowly walk these down to push those injectors into the O-rings. You can sit there and fight with them and all that stuff, but I found this is the easiest way to do it. Just even pressure, pushes them right in. And you can see it's come down on the gasket. The bolts are starting to get tight. Go ahead and tighten them up. You know you got your injector seated. You can look down here at the bottom and you see them coming out the bottom. That's how they're supposed to be. Go ahead and tighten all that down. There we go. We got our injectors sticking through like they're supposed to be. Everything's all flat with our gasket. We got our diaphragm pushed down into our dust seal. Now we'll go ahead and put the rest of our bolts in here to hold this. You got 3 equal length ones, and then this front one is shorter, quite a bit shorter. So if you take it all apart and you're not paying attention, short one goes up in the front. Get all those tight. Go back around, check everything, make sure it's still tight. Put those other bolts in, you might suck it down a little bit and it'll loosen some of these up. There it is. That's the main part of your throttle body right here. All this is vacuum ports and your butterflies. So this is the crucial part. This is where all your fuel is going to leak, because no fuel even goes through this base. Like, it comes up through these ports in the back here, goes up here, down into your accelerator pump, comes through, comes out into your injector cups, and then when the injectors fire, it pushes it out. So the only part of the throttle body that gets any fuel is this part right here. So you want to be really sure that all the gasket surfaces are cleaned up good, all that stuff, and that all your seals are in there good and everything is tight. So got all that put back together. Now there's a gasket that goes in there, and there's 2 different ones. One's narrower on the front, one's wider on the front. If we look at our throttle body, we can see that this takes the narrower one. So that's going to slide right on there like that. This is going to sit down in here. We got our 3 bolts that hold that on the top. We'll go ahead and put those in. Make sure we get this snug down good and tight. But I want to do it even. That's a big thing. Make sure all these pieces, when you put them together, you don't want to just go to one corner and start cranking on it and then go to the other side and crank on it, because they're all like pot metal aluminum and they snap very easily. I'm sure you guys can all assume how I have that information. I may or may not have busted 1 or 2 of these. We'll say 1. 1 sounds good. Make sure it's on there nice and tight. Like so. Clean all the excess dirt off of it. Then you got this gasket here. Goes on your sensor. And you look around till you see where the sensor goes, right there. Screw that back in. Get it good and tight. We got our throttle position sensor. You look at it, the plug's going to be facing up. You got your little arm here, and that's going to sit inside there. So it's going to go just like that. Sorry, I know you guys can't see this, but this is the best way I can hold it while I put it on. Alright, got my throttle position sensor back in place. We'll go ahead and tighten that down. Once again, this is one thing that you don't want to crank on. It's got lock washers in there. Just want to make sure they're nice and snug. Gonna hold it, not gonna back off. And that's it, because you'll break this. So, got all that, throttle position, fuel pressure sensor. I think that's a fuel pressure sensor. I'm not 100% sure what it is. If you know what it is, leave it down in the comments. Then I'll know what it is. So, our injector hat's back on. Everything's in. All we have left to do is put our fuel deals back in. The smaller one is going to be your return. They got these little nylon flat washers that go on them. So we'll take those. And the flat washers, the little flat washer seals, they don't ever seem to snap back on these right, so I always just drop them down in the hole, push them in there, make sure they're flat, and then we'll go ahead and screw that in. And then we've got our bigger one. It's going to sit down in this hole, lay down in there just like that. Got to make sure this one's off of here, like so. Screw this one down in there. I'll get those good and tight, like so. Bada bing, bada boom. You got a rebuilt throttle body. So, the biggest problem that I've found on these, I don't even know that this one had anything wrong with it. It was really dirty. We're cleaning up everything else and regasketing everything else. So, obviously we're doing the throttle body too. Why wouldn't I? So, the biggest problem with these is gasket failure and your vacuum ports plug up with carbon and soot and whatever, or the injectors go bad. So I don't know if these injectors are good or not. I'm assuming they are. It was a running truck before, so I'm assuming they work. I cleaned the tips off real good. I cleaned out all the passageways, all that, so I know fuel's going to get through them. Once we get the motor back in the truck, get everything hooked back up, we fire it up. If they don't have a nice fan pattern, or if they're not firing or whatever, then we'll reach that when we get there. But for what these injectors cost, if these are still working, we're not replacing them. But I mean, that's the gist of it. 90% of the time, if you're getting into one of these throttle bodies, it's because you're leaking. There's not a whole lot to it. Like I said, there's the fuel in, the fuel out, your injectors, and that's it. I mean, that's really all there is to it. You got some vacuum ports, but that doesn't do much for controlling the throttle body. That's all for controlling other stuff on the vehicle. So we got her all cleaned up. We yeah, looking good. I'm happy with it. We'll put it on there and it should work great. So I'm going to take it over. I still got tape on the intake manifold so that junk can't get down in the intake, dust and dirt and whatever else while it's just sitting. But I'm going to take this over and just go ahead and set it on top of the motor just because that's where it goes. See what it looks like. And yeah, so there you go. That's how you rebuild a GM throttle body. Alright, I took the throttle body over, got it set on the motor, and I've got a little surprise for the owner of the truck. I know he watches these videos, and to see how his truck's going and stuff, and he hasn't seen this yet. So I got the throttle body set on there, and I got a little surprise for him that goes with the theme of the engine. So here it is. Got our throttle body set on there. Everything you can see is really nice and clean and looks good. And then I went and picked up this satin wrinkle finish black air cleaner that matches the valve covers, and it's got the red Chevrolet on it that matches our block. And I got to do a little bit of trimming and fixing work on this original stud for the throttle body, but then it's got this nice black with red outline bow tie on it. So buddy, I hope you like it. Really makes this motor pop, and it's going to look really good in that engine compartment. So that being said, there's a couple things I want to go into a little bit more depth on with rebuilding the throttle body. I mentioned that I let it all sit fully submerged in Simple Green overnight. If you guys have been watching the channel for a while, you know I use Simple Green for everything. It's a good cleaning agent, but it's not a harsh chemical. It's not hard on stuff. It won't eat anything. I'm not saying anything bad against any of the other cleaners that most people use or you should use to clean this stuff, like Chem Dip, stuff like that. That stuff works great. But the Simple Green, I know I can put a carburetor or a throttle body or something like that in there, fully submerge it, let it sit for 10 days if I want to, and all it's going to do is eat all the fuel and carbon and gum and gunk and all that off of it and clean everything out. Where the Chem Dip or things like that you would use to clean something like that, you put it in there, if you leave it in there more than 10 or 15 minutes, you're at risk of damaging stuff. The Simple Green, I mean, there was some of those pieces still had old gasket on them. I let it sit overnight in there and pulled it out, and it didn't even harm the gasket. But it thoroughly cleaned out all the passageways and all that stuff because I sprayed through them with carb cleaner after I pulled them out of the Simple Green, and you wouldn't believe the crap that came out of there. So it loosened it all up, got it good. It got that base extremely clean. It looks great. So my choice is Simple Green. A lot of people may not think about Simple Green to do stuff like that. I've been doing it for quite a while now, and it works really good. And I mean, I dumped it out before I showed you guys, but I used probably a half a gallon of Simple Green with a gallon of water, which is pretty heavy concentrate. Put it in a bucket so it would fully submerge all those parts, left them in there overnight. When I came back today, it was straight black. You couldn't see down in it, you couldn't see through it, you couldn't even tell it used to be green. So I know it's doing work, it does a good job. So if you're ever looking for something to you know, thoroughly clean something where you can leave it submerged, if it's really nasty, really clogged up, really bad, keep that in the back of your head, because some of those other harsh chemicals, you can't leave stuff in there too long because it'll start eating the aluminum and stuff like that. I'm not sponsored by any of these companies that I'm mentioning. It's just stuff that I found works in the past, and if I know something that works good for me, I want to share it with you guys so you can have better luck with your projects. So just wanted to explain that a little bit. Simple Green works great. I use it to clean everything. I clean interiors with it. I used it to clean the carpet for Room Runner that I pressure washed. I used it to clean the throttle body. I soak carburetor parts in it, everything. I mean, I use it all the time, and it does a good job. So other than that, this paint job in the engine compartment, has had overnight to kind of dry and cure a little bit, and I'm very pleased with the way it turned out. Really even. You can't see any tiger stripes or anything from painting it with a rattle can. It turned out really good. I'll probably let it sit for, I don't know, 2 more days, maybe 3 more days before I put the motor back in. I may go ahead and paint the frame tomorrow because two overnights should be enough time to where it'll cure, that if I bump it going in there to paint the frame and stuff, it's not going to chip it off or anything like that. So I may do that tomorrow, and then wait. I might, today is Wednesday, I'll probably wait and put the motor in on Monday because I've got some other fun stuff I want to video and work on the end of this week, get it done. So but that's going to do it for this video. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and watching. Don't forget to check out my merch site, www.harmongarage.net. See if there's anything on there that you like. I'm working with a company to try to get some better, cooler stuff, but it'll probably take a little bit of time. If you're wanting to go to a truck show, first part of the next year, the Truck Gathering, Norman, Oklahoma, April 15th. Check it out, www.thetruckgathering.com. And that's it. I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you very much. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this. Y'all have a good one. We'll see you next time.